Hi, welcome back to Storytime with Jenny Presents. Today I'm going to be talking about something that's not fun or happy, it's really just sad. And so if you're here for the funny stories, then go ahead and skip this one. And if you are here to learn more about who I am and where I come from, then go ahead and stick around. So today's story is going to be about the 5 years I went under the impression that I was going to be dying any day now. It started back in 2017 when I started to develop, I'm going to use the word symptoms, because it was wide and varied, and it started in the beginning with really weird, odd things. Like one of my knees would just go to sleep. Not the rest of my leg, just the knee itself. I would get pins and needles inside it. And then I was like swelling everywhere. It progressed every 3 to 6 weeks, actually. I was developing either new symptoms or my symptoms were worsening. So a couple of new symptoms examples was I would get blurry vision periodically, and then it would just periodically just fix itself just as naturally as it came. I had pain for days after working out or doing any kind of physical activity at all, to be totally honest. And when I say physical activity, I mean vacuuming my house. I would be in pain for days after doing that. Full body pain at that. I couldn't wear shoes anymore. I should say I couldn't wear shoe anymore. I didn't have any problems with my right foot, but on my left foot, there was a thing, I honestly don't know what it is. It's still there. It's not a wound. It's not a sore. It's, but at the time, like if you just touched it, barely touched it, it would hurt. It would burn so badly. So I couldn't do things like wear socks or even sandals, because anywhere where the sandal would be connecting onto my foot would be excruciatingly painful. So I stopped being able to wear shoes in around March of 2017. And I started going to the doctor, obviously, to try to find out what was wrong with me. At the time, I started going to my doctor, who wasn't great, but I didn't need him to be great. I just needed some medication for my ulcers, and everything else was fine. But at this point, I did need him to be great. So he ran a bunch of tests, and he did a lot of the basic tests, like blood panels and ultrasounds, and for some reason, x-rays. He was, honestly, there were times where I'm pretty sure he was just like, okay, well, let's try something else. The symptom he was focusing on the most was the full body swelling. It was at a point when I finally started going to the doctor about it, where by evening, I had to change completely from everything, all the way down to my bra and underwear, because I was so much more swollen. I was about 25 pounds more at the end of the day than I was when I woke up. And so that was the symptom that he was trying to focus on, because he couldn't figure out what was going on with any of the others. And he started just calling it lymphedema, because, and it makes sense because I did research along with him, but edema does not typically happen in your entire body, but lymphedema does. And the difference between the two is which system in your body is in trouble, pretty much. So lymphedema means it's your lymphatic system. Incidentally, I learned a lot about the lymphatic system and the things that it does. Also, did you know that you can live longer without without your pretty much any other system in your body than you can without your lymphatic system. When your lymphatic system shuts down, it just kills you eventually, and you just start getting more and more tired, and then you eventually just don't wake up from one of the naps or night sleeps that you got. And that's what ended up happening as to what my doctor said what I should be expecting. And I'm like, well, no, that's not okay. There's got to be something else. And his answer was, get your last will and testament in order and make sure that all of your wishes are in place and all of your affairs are tidied. And what he was telling me is that I was dying. But he didn't use those words, and he certainly didn't put those words in my chart. But he did say that there was nothing else he could do for me, and that there were no other tests that could be ran. Now, obviously, I didn't take that as an answer, because that's just not an acceptable prognosis. I'm not going to lie. I really thought he was incompetent by that point in time, because who tells someone that? What kind of doctor gives up and tells someone that? Spoiler alert, a lot of them, actually. So I began a quest to find someone that would be willing to run additional tests to try to find out what on earth was going on with me. During this time, every 3 to 6 weeks, developing new symptoms or my other symptoms becoming more and more severe. Not being able to wear shoes made it so that the only time that I left the house was to go to my doctor's appointments. I honestly suffered a very large amount of pain during that time. And I had found a little rain boot that fit over my foot that I could tie around the ankle so that I could walk and not be considered barefoot and not be allowed into the doctor's offices for the appointments. And doctor after doctor, specialist after specialist told me the same thing. Every single one of them. No, nothing else we can do. That first prognosis is probably true. And then what others would allude it to was that it's got to be something related to your Lynch syndrome. Now, Lynch syndrome is a genetic disorder that I have that increases my predisposition to all cancer. So them saying it's related to my Lynch syndrome is them saying it's related to cancer. It's cancer. Because that's the only thing that's related to Lynch syndrome is cancer. So every single one of them said to me I was dying of an unknown cancer and that they weren't going to do any more tests because they didn't have any more tests to do. So I didn't accept that, not gonna lie. It still really bothered me when the 12th doctor said it versus when the first doctor said it. When the nurse practitioners said it, when the people that were doing the wraps for me for doing a lymphatic drain where I was covered in wraps from the top of my thighs all the way down to my feet. And then after it was 6 weeks of being in wraps and them seeing no improvement at all, they got me these compression stockings that went from top of thigh all the way down. I mean, they were stockings. They were awful, by the way. And they're like, this is the best that we can do to try to make it not as miserable for you. But they didn't help. They made me just as miserable, just in stockings. And again, a large amount of pain because that foot. And then just generalized pain from the swelling that the compression socks weren't actually doing any good for. I reached out to the Mayo Clinic because I had been told that that was the place. That's the one. If If you need medical help, the Mayo Clinic is where you go. And they were wrong. I spent 2 weeks at the Mayo Clinic. There were some cool things. One, the hotel I was in was connected to the Mayo Clinic via underground tunnels. Creepy tunnels, but I didn't have to deal with being outside or traffic or anything like that. I just took the elevator from my hotel down to the basement and followed the signs to the Mayo Clinic each day. And the test came back so quickly. It was crazy. Within hours, there were results posted on their portal. So a test was done, and within hours, I had the results. And the tests were back to back. The appointments were back to back. I would start the day with having 5 appointments for that day, and each one of them would be adding additional tests or adding additional appointments or adding additional specialists that I would go to. And it was pretty much 8 hours a day of nonstop being there with doctors or in getting labs or getting other various tests completed. And as each specialist finished their test, they would end with, "It's not in our specialty, so it's not anything we can help you with," until we got all the way to the end of the 2 weeks, and they were out of tests. They were out of specialists. The general practitioner doctor that was managing all of it wasn't even there that day, never even contacted me. I just went home. And when I got home, he reached out on Monday when he got back from his, I don't know. And he was like, "So everything's great, right?" And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of ripped him a new one via email in the most professional way I could. But I made it very clear how very unhappy I was. And he's like, "Well, what do you mean? You just need to do things like lose weight." I couldn't lose weight because exercising was physically painful. And with all of the additional fluid in my body, there wasn't a point in time in which weight loss was actually possible or conceivable. And then on top of all of it, when basic household functions were causing pain, it's not really viable. And he was like, "Well, I mean, there's only so many tests we have for cancer. So we did all of them. What can I say?" And that's what I got from 2 weeks at the Mayo Clinic. They violated me from top down and then some. Carried a jar of pee around. It was a jug of pee around for 2 days because they needed me to track how much I was urinating. And I couldn't quite be sure if it was just 1 day, so they wanted to make sure I had it all. So it was 2 days worth of peeing in a jug of back-to-back doctor's appointments, carrying a jug of urine around. They did a colonoscopy in which I was awake for a lot more because they didn't put me down until I was in the room. And then I had an appointment immediately afterwards. And so like they were waking me up with smacking me in the face in that same room to try to get me awake enough so they could get me into the wheelchair to get me to my next appointment. And all of it. And I'm not even going to tell you how much the bills were because we hit my out-of-pocket. And I still received 14 bills a month until they reported me to the collection agency. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't pay them. I let it hit my credit because frankly, they didn't do a single thing for me. And I wasn't going to pay their astronomical prices for them doing, I kid you not, nothing. Absolutely nothing. So, when I got back home, I tried to find another doctor here to see about getting tests started up again. And I realized and found out that going to the Mayo Clinic was really, really dangerous and bad for me, because what I started hearing from the doctors was, if the Mayo Clinic can't help you, then neither can we. There's not a thing we would be able to do if the Mayo Clinic wasn't able to help you. And then I finally found a doctor who was willing to listen and willing to start running tests again. And then, right after a test that was, I have to say, the worst test I've ever had done in my life, which was a check for my lymphatic system working correctly, the whole reason for the prognosis of related to Lynch. And they had never done it because they're like, oh, it's an invasive test. But, telling me I'm going to die any day now was not invasive at all. But this was actually invasive, doesn't even begin to describe. When I got into the room, I joked around about how there were 3 big guys in the room with us along with the tech. And I'm like, are they going to be holding me down or something? Ha ha ha, because I'm funny. And she was like, ha ha ha, yes. And I'm like, oh, well, what's this test going to be? And what that test was they were going to inject dye into, in between my big toe and toe right next to it. 2 injections on the right, 2 injections on the left. In that spot, in between my toes. And the guys were there to literally hold my legs. One was holding the top of my leg, one was holding my calf, and then one was holding my foot, in order for the tech to be able to get the dye where it needed to go. And I can tell you, it's good they were there, because otherwise that technician would have been kicked. And not gonna lie, it was excruciating. And then that was just the beginning of the test. I then had to lay down in an MRI machine in which they watched the dye rise through my lymphatic system. And what they were doing was timing it to see how long it took for the dye to go up through my lymphatic system, to see if it was sluggish or not moving at all, or what was going on with it. And lo and behold, it was not my lymphatic system. For some reason, still unknown today, in 2025, June of 2025, still unknown today, my body swells. It's great. But if any of them had done that test, and this is what my doctor told me, they never would have been giving me the prognosis of cancer. They would have been giving me the prognosis of fibromyalgia, because that's like the only thing they have right now that causes that full body swelling. And I'm not gonna lie, all of the different medications that I am on now to help maintain it help a lot. Not all of the time. I do still swell. There are still a lot of days full of a lot of pain, but I push that pain back because I'm not gonna lie, going 5 years thinking and living like I was going to die any day now really changed my perspective on absolutely everything in life. And a little bit of pain, that's okay. I can deal with a little bit of pain. It's better than not knowing if I'm gonna wake up every time I close my eyes and go to bed, right? So that's the story of how I went about 5 years thinking I was just going to die. Yay! I told you, not fun. But if you've stuck around this long and you haven't watched any of the other things, I'm going to go ahead and link my cancer video here. Maybe it might be over here. I don't know. Sometimes the camera flippies and sometimes it's not. So it'll be like here or here. So stay tuned. I'll follow this up with like the next few that I do will be really, really funny. Oh, and then, yeah, sorry.